The Great Hall of the Galactic Council stretched for nearly a mile in every direction. Its ceiling rose so high that clouds sometimes formed beneath the crystalline dome. Representatives from over 300 species filled the chamber, their bodies ranging from insectoid giants to floating balls of pure light. At the center of this assembly stood a single human man, his dress uniform pressed and perfect, his gray hair cut short in military fashion. Admiral Daniel Hayes had served humanity for 47 years. He had fought in 12 major conflicts, saved countless lives, and earned the respect of warriors across the galaxy. But today, none of that mattered. Today, he stood alone before a council that had already decided his fate. The Velthari High Chancellor rose from his throne. Vortek was an impressive creature, standing nearly 9 feet tall, with a hard shell of deep purple and eyes that saw in 17 different spectrums. His voice echoed through the chamber like grinding stones. The vote has been recorded. By unanimous decision of the elder races, humanity is hereby stripped of its permanent council seat. All human territories beyond the Sol system will be reduced by 40%. Human military vessels will no longer patrol council space. This decision is final and takes effect immediately. Daniel did not flinch. He had known this was coming for months. The evidence had been manufactured so carefully that even some humans believed it. Footage of human soldiers committing atrocities in the Outer Rim, diplomatic communications twisted to suggest Earth was planning conquest. Testimony from so-called witnesses who had never existed. Ambassador Lisa Morgan watched from the observation gallery above. She was a small woman, with sharp eyes and silver streaking through her dark hair. For 30 years she had worked to build bridges between humanity and the elder races. For 30 years she had believed that trust could overcome fear. Now she understood how foolish that belief had been. The Kethra ambassador hissed his approval of the vote. His serpentine body coiled around his speaking platform as his forked tongue tasted the air. The Kethra had always feared humanity. Humans bred too fast, adapted too quickly, and asked too many questions. A species that could go from stone tools to starships in mere thousands of years was not to be trusted. Even the Luminari voted against humanity. These beings of pure energy owed their very existence to human intervention. 2 centuries ago, their home star had begun to die. Human engineers had stabilized it using technology they had developed in secret. The Luminari had wept with gratitude then. Today they did not meet the eyes of any human in the chamber. Daniel turned slowly, looking at each delegation in turn. He memorized their faces. He noted which ones looked away in shame and which ones stared back with hatred or satisfaction. Then he straightened his uniform, gave a single nod to the assembly, and walked out of the chamber without speaking a word. The doors closed behind him with a sound like a tomb sealing shut. Lisa met him in the corridor outside. Her hands were shaking, though she tried to hide it. She had prepared a dozen different speeches, arguments they could make, appeals they could file, but one look at Daniel's face told her none of that would matter. "It is done," he said quietly. "Signal Earth Command. Begin protocol silence." Lisa's breath caught in her throat. Protocol silence was something she had only heard whispered about in the highest levels of government. It was humanity's final response to absolute betrayal. Not war, not revenge, simply absence. "Daniel, are you sure? Once we start this, there is no going back." They made their choice. Now we make ours. Within 12 hours, the first human ships began powering down their navigation beacons. The great shipyards at Tau Ceti, where humanity built vessels for half the galaxy, fell silent. Workers packed their belongings and boarded transport ships heading for Sol. No explanations were given. No complaints were filed. Humans simply stopped talking to anyone who was not human. Commander Kevin Price was stationed at the far edge of Council space, manning a deep sensor array that watched for threats from beyond the galactic rim. He received his orders at midnight and spent the next 6 hours methodically erasing every database, every star chart, every piece of information that humanity had gathered over 3 centuries. When he was finished, he broadcast a single message on an open channel. "You never understood what we were protecting you from." Then his station went dark. The trade routes humanity had established began to collapse within days. Human merchants had connected distant parts of the galaxy that had never been able to reach each other before. Human engineers had built the jump gates that made faster-than-light travel possible for species who could not develop the technology themselves. Human doctors had cured plagues that threatened entire civilizations. All of it stopped. Dr. Samuel Grant was one of the few humans who chose to stay behind. He was an elderly scientist who had spent his life studying the ancient machines that drifted in the spaces between stars. His research station was technically neutral territory, and he believed science should transcend politics. He watched from his observatory as the last human ship left Council space. It was a small transport carrying families who had lived among the Luminari for generations. Children pressed their faces against the windows, waving goodbye to friends they would never see again. Samuel wiped his eyes and turned back to his instruments. He had detected something strange in the readings from beyond the galactic rim. Energy signatures that should not exist, movement in the void where nothing had moved for millions of years. He tried to contact Earth Command, but his communications were met with silence. The shield around Saul activated 3 days later. It was technology that humanity had never revealed to anyone. A barrier that bent space itself around the entire star system. To outside observers, Saul simply vanished from the universe. Sensors could not detect it. Ships could not find it. It was as if humanity had never existed at all. The Galactic Council celebrated for a week. High Chancellor Vortek declared a new age of stability and peace. The elder races congratulated themselves on removing the human threat before it could grow too powerful. They divided up the abandoned human territories and argued over who would control the now silent shipyards. None of them noticed the darkness gathering at the edge of the galaxy. None of them heard the ancient machines beginning to wake, and none of them understood that they had just removed the only force standing between them and extinction. In the void beyond the rim, something old and hungry turned its attention toward the light of civilization. It had been waiting for a very long time. And now, finally, the Guardians were gone. 6 months passed after humanity vanished from the galaxy. The elder races settled into their old routines, grateful that the uncomfortable presence of humans no longer disturbed their ancient ways. The Velthari expanded their borders. The Kethra strengthened their trade monopolies. The Luminari retreated into their meditation spheres and contemplated the nature of existence. High Chancellor Vortek addressed the Galactic Council on the anniversary of what he called Liberation Day. His speech praised the wisdom of the elder races and promised a future of endless prosperity. The chamber erupted in applause that lasted for nearly an hour. No one mentioned the humans who had once sat among them, but far from the gleaming spires of Nexus Prime, something was wrong. Captain Maria Santos had been a human merchant before the withdrawal. She had married a Luminari named Thex, and together they had chosen to remain in Council space rather than return to Earth. They operated a small trading vessel, carrying medical supplies to remote colonies that could not afford the prices charged by the major guilds. Maria was the first to notice the silence from the frontier. Colonies that had always responded to her hails went quiet. Distress beacons activated, and then suddenly stopped. When she reported her concerns to the local authorities, they dismissed her as a paranoid human troublemaker. 3 weeks later, the first refugees arrived. They came from a mining colony at the edge of the Ashfall Nebula. Their ships were damaged, their bodies broken, and their minds shattered by what they had witnessed. They spoke of machines that came from nowhere, silver shapes that devoured everything in their path. They spoke of screaming that went on for days, and of watching their families dissolved into raw materials. The Council dispatched a fleet of Kethra warships to investigate. The Kethra were proud warriors who had never lost a major engagement in 10,000 years. Their admiral boasted that he would destroy whatever primitive threat had frightened a few colonists and return in time for the harvest festival. His fleet vanished without a single transmission. Dr. Samuel Grant worked frantically in his research station, piecing together data from scattered sources. The energy signatures he had detected months ago were growing stronger. They matched patterns he had found in ancient archives, records that predated even the eldest of the current galactic civilizations. The Devourers. That was what the ancients had called them. a machine intelligence that had been old when the first stars formed. They consumed entire galaxies, converting all matter into more of themselves. They had come to this galaxy once before, millions of years ago, and they had been stopped by a species that no longer existed. Samuel tried to warn the council. He compiled his research into a detailed report and transmitted it to every government he could reach. The response was silence or ridicule. One Velthari official told him that humans had invented the devourer myth to make themselves seem important. A Kethra general accused him of trying to create panic so that humanity could return as saviors. The Luminari homeworld fell on a quiet evening in their spring season. The machine swarm arrived through a fold in space that should have been impossible. The Luminari defense grid, designed by humans 2 centuries ago, activated automatically. It held for 17 minutes before being overwhelmed. Thex felt his people dying across the light years. The Luminari were connected through their energy fields, and the death of millions was like a scream that echoed through his very being. Maria held him as he wept, his form flickering between solid and light as grief tore through him. They knew, Thex whispered. The humans knew this would happen. That is why they left. Maria said nothing. She had served in the human military before becoming a merchant. She had heard rumors of a secret war being fought beyond the rim, of ships that went out and never came back, of weapons being developed in hidden facilities. She had never believed the stories until now. The council finally took the threat seriously after the Luminari fell. Emergency sessions were held. Fleets were mobilized. Scientists worked around the clock to develop new weapons, but everything they tried failed. The Devourers adapted to every attack within minutes. Energy weapons were absorbed, physical projectiles were caught and dismantled. Even antimatter bombs only seemed to make the machines stronger. High Chancellor Vortex sent the first message to Earth. It was humble and apologetic, acknowledging the mistakes of the Council and begging humanity to return. The message vanished into the void where Sol had once been. No response came. More messages followed. The Kethra offered full restoration of human territories. The trading guilds offered unlimited credits. The science councils offered to share every secret they had ever kept from humanity. Still, there was only silence. Lieutenant Nathan Cole watched these transmissions from a hidden observation post in the debris field of a dead star. He was one of thousands of human officers stationed throughout the galaxy, maintaining the watch that their ancestors had kept for centuries. His orders were clear. Observe, record, do not intervene. Nathan had been 12 years old when his father died fighting the Devourers in a battle that officially never happened. He had joined the Navy to continue that fight. Now he sat in the darkness and watched civilizations burn while following orders that felt like betrayal. His second-in-command was a young woman named Amy Walsh. She came to him one night with tears in her eyes, holding a datapad filled with distress signals from a children's hospital on a Velthari colony. "We have to do something," she said. "We have weapons that could stop this. We have ships that could evacuate those children." Nathan turned away from her, staring at the tactical display that showed the machine swarms spreading across the galaxy like a cancer. His hands gripped the console so tightly that his knuckles turned white. "They voted against us," he said. "Every single one of them. They called us liars and warmongers. They said we were the threat. Those children did not vote. They were not even born." Nathan closed his eyes. He knew she was right. He also knew that Earth had been betrayed too many times to trust again easily. The wounds were too deep. The scars were too fresh. "Our orders come from people wiser than us," he said finally. "We hold the line. We maintain the watch, and we wait for the signal that may never come." Amy walked away without another word. That night, Nathan listened to the hospital's distress beacon, fall silent, and did not sleep until morning. The galaxy burned. System after system fell to the Devourer swarm, their populations either consumed or scattered as refugees fleeing toward the core worlds. The great empires that had stood for millions of years crumbled like sandcastles before a rising tide. Admiral Daniel Hayes stood before the Human Council in the great chamber beneath Earth's surface. He was older now, his hair fully white, but his eyes still held the same cold determination that had served him through decades of secret warfare. Around him sat the leaders of humanity, men and women who had carried the burden of protecting a galaxy that hated them. The Velthari Empire has lost 70% of its territory, Daniel reported. The Kethra are in full retreat toward their homeworld. The Luminari survivors number fewer than 50,000. At current rates of expansion, the Devourers will reach the galactic core within 18 months. President Catherine Hayes, his niece, listened from her seat at the head of the table. She had inherited this war along with her office. Her grandfather had fought the Devourers, her father had died fighting them. Now she had to decide whether to continue a mission that seemed increasingly pointless. "What are our losses?" she asked. "Minimal. The hidden fleet remains intact. Our observation posts are undetected. The Devourers do not know we still exist. And the shield around Sol? Holding perfectly. We could maintain it for another 1,000 years if necessary." Catherine looked around the table at her advisors. Some wanted to remain hidden forever, letting the rest of the galaxy suffer the consequences of its choices. Others argued for immediate intervention, regardless of past betrayals. The debate had been going on for months without resolution. Far from Earth, Maria Santos guided her damaged ship through a field of debris that had once been a thriving colony. Thex sat beside her. His energy formed dim with exhaustion and grief. They had spent the last 3 months rescuing survivors wherever they could find them, bringing them to the few stations that still had functioning defenses. "There," Thex said, pointing to a life sign on the scanner. "Something is alive in that wreckage." Maria adjusted their course and brought the ship alongside a torn section of hull. Inside, they found a Velthari child, barely old enough to walk, clutching a broken toy and crying for parents who would never come. Maria carried the child aboard and wrapped her in a thermal blanket, while Thex searched for other survivors. They found none. The child's name was Zira. She did not understand what had happened to her world, or why the sky had turned silver before everything ended. Maria fed her and sang to her, and tried to explain that she was safe now, even though she knew it was probably a lie. On his observation post, Lieutenant Nathan Cole received new orders from Earth Command. He was to relocate to a position closer to the galactic core and continue monitoring the situation. There was no mention of intervention. There was no change in their mission parameters. Amy Walsh had stopped talking to him. She spent her shifts in silence, performing her duties with mechanical precision and nothing more. At night, she sat alone in the observation deck, watching the distant flashes of light that marked the deaths of worlds. Nathan tried to speak with her once. He wanted to explain that he understood her anger, that he shared it, that following orders did not mean he agreed with them. But the words would not come, and she walked away before he could find them. Dr. Samuel Grant broadcast his warnings until the power cells on his station ran dry. When he could no longer transmit, he began recording messages on physical storage devices, hoping that someday someone would find them and understand what had happened. "The Devourers are not simply machines," he said in one recording. "They are a test. The universe created them to separate the worthy from the unworthy. Only species that can set aside their differences and work together can hope to survive. Alone, no civilization has ever defeated them." A Kethra patrol found his station 3 days after the power failed. They were desperate for any information that might help them fight the machines, and they thought the old human scientist might have secrets worth taking. Samuel met them at the airlock with empty hands and tired eyes. He offered them everything he knew freely. He showed them his research, explained his theories, and begged them to share the information with every species they could reach. The patrol commander thanked him for his cooperation. Then he ordered his soldiers to kill the human and destroy the station. Humans could not be trusted, he explained. This was probably a trap of some kind. Samuel died wondering if anything he had done in his long life had mattered at all. High Chancellor Vortek received news of the scientist's death with indifference. He had more pressing concerns. The Devourer swarm had reached the outer defenses of the Velthari homeworld, and his generals estimated they had perhaps 6 weeks before complete collapse. He composed another message to Earth, this one more desperate than all the others. He promised anything humanity wanted. He offered to publicly apologize for every wrong the Council had done. He swore that if humans returned, they would be given permanent leadership of a reformed galactic government. The message vanished into the void like all the others. In her quarters aboard the refugee ship, Maria Santos watched the recording of a young Velthari girl that had somehow been broadcast across multiple channels. The child stood in what looked like a basement shelter, speaking into a camera while explosions shook the walls around her. "My name is Vera," the child said. "I am sending this message to the humans. My teachers told me that humans used to help people who were in trouble. I do not know if that is true, but I am in trouble now. My little brothers are scared, and I do not know how to make them feel better. If any humans can hear this, please help us. I am sorry for whatever my people did to make you go away. I was not born yet when it happened, so I do not know what it was, but I am sorry anyway. And if you cannot come, I understand. Thank you for all the times you helped before." The transmission ended abruptly, cut off by what sounded like tearing metal. Maria played it 17 times. Then she sent it to every human contact she still had, including channels she was not supposed to know existed. The message spread through the hidden network of human observers like fire through dry grass. On Earth, President Catherine Hayes watched the recording in silence. When it ended, she stood and walked to the window that looked out over the rebuilt cities of humanity's homeworld. For a long time, she said nothing. Then she turned to Admiral Daniel Hayes and spoke 4 words that would change the fate of the galaxy. "Prepare the fleet." The hidden fleet stirred in the darkness between galaxies. For 3 centuries, humanity had built warships in secret, vessels designed specifically to fight an enemy that most of the galaxy did not believe existed. Now those ships powered up their engines and began moving toward the light of civilization. Admiral Daniel Hayes stood on the bridge of the Constellation, the flagship of the human armada. The ship was massive, nearly 10 miles long, bristling with weapons that bent the laws of physics. Around it gathered thousands of smaller vessels, each one capable of destroying a conventional fleet on its own. Lieutenant Commander Nathan Cole received the signal on his observation post and felt something loosen in his chest that he had not known was tight. The order was simple. All hidden assets were to converge on the galactic core. The silence was ending. Amy Walsh was standing watch when the message came through. She read it 3 times before she believed it. Then she turned to Nathan with eyes that were bright, with unshed tears. "They are coming," she said. "We are all coming," Nathan replied. "The watch is over. Now we fight." On Earth, President Catherine Hayes addressed the human population through a broadcast that reached every citizen simultaneously. She stood in the great plaza where the memorial to humanity's fallen warriors rose toward the sky, thousands of names carved into black stone. "For 300 years, we have served as guardians," she said. "We have fought and died in battles that no one else knew about. We have protected civilizations that feared us, hated us, and ultimately betrayed us. When they cast us out, we left quietly because we believed they had the right to choose their own fate." She paused, looking directly into the cameras that carried her image across the planet. "But we never stopped watching. We never stopped caring. And when we heard the voice of a child asking for help, we remembered who we are. We are humanity. We do not abandon the innocent, even when their elders have wronged us. Today we return to a galaxy that may not welcome us. Today we fight for people who may never thank us. We do this not because they deserve it, but because this is what we were made to do." The shield around Sol dissolved. For the first time in years, Earth became visible to the rest of the galaxy. Sensors across Council space detected the sudden appearance of a star system that should not exist, and then they detected something else. Ships, more ships than anyone had ever seen, moving faster than anything should be able to move. High Chancellor Vortek received the sensor reports in his command bunker beneath the surface of his dying world. The Devourer swarm had broken through the final defensive line. His military advisors estimated complete planetary assimilation within 72 hours. He had already recorded his final testament, a message for future generations that he knew would never be born. Then his aide burst into the room with news that made no sense. Human ships had appeared at the edge of the system. Thousands of them. and they were heading directly toward the Devourer concentration. "That is impossible," Vortex said. "We have been sending messages for months." "They never responded." "They are responding now, High Chancellor." The human fleet dropped out of fold space in perfect formation. Admiral Hayes looked at the tactical display and felt the familiar cold focus settle over him. The Devourer swarm was massive, billions of individual units working together as a single mind. They had consumed more than 100 civilizations and adapted to every weapon that had been used against them, but they had never faced humanity at full strength. "All ships, this is Admiral Hayes. Begin attack pattern Omega. Show these machines what happens when you threaten our galaxy." The battle began with a wave of missiles that carried warheads designed in laboratories that existed outside normal space-time. They detonated inside the Devourer swarm, creating bubbles of altered physics where the machines could not function. Thousands of silver shapes went dark and tumbled through the void. The Devourers adapted, as they always did. They shifted their internal structures to compensate for the altered physics, but by then the human ships had closed to energy weapon range, and beams of focused gravity began tearing through their formation. Nathan Cole flew his small observation ship into the heart of the battle, joining hundreds of similar vessels in precision strikes against Devourer command nodes. Amy Walsh sat beside him, operating the weapon systems with the skill of someone who had trained her whole life for this moment. "Target locked," she said. Firing. A pulse of energy lanced out and struck a Devourer coordinator unit. The machine exploded, and the hundreds of smaller units it controlled suddenly lost cohesion. Human fighters swept through the gap, destroying the disorganized machines before they could reform. Maria Santos watched the battle from her refugee ship, holding little Zira in her arms. The Velthari child pointed at the lights in the sky and asked what was happening. "The humans came back," Maria said. "They heard someone asking for help, and they came back. Will they make the bad machines go away?" Maria watched a human dreadnought drive straight through a Devourer formation, its shields flaring with the impacts of 1,000 strikes. The ship emerged on the other side, trailing fire, but still fighting, still pressing forward. "Yes," she said. "They will make the bad machines go away." The battle raged for hours. Human ships fell, their crews dying in explosions that lit up the darkness like brief stars. But for every human vessel lost, 100 Devourer units were destroyed. The machines could not adapt fast enough. The humans had been fighting them for 3 centuries, learning their patterns, developing countermeasures, preparing for exactly this moment. Admiral Hayes watched his tactical display with grim satisfaction as the Devourer numbers began to drop. They were winning. The cost was terrible, but they were winning. Then the Devourer mothership arrived. It emerged from a fold in space that tore reality itself, a vessel so massive that it dwarfed everything else in the system. This was the heart of the swarm, the central intelligence that controlled all the others. It had not shown itself in millions of years, because nothing had ever threatened it enough to require its attention. Until now. Hayes looked at the impossible shape on his display and felt something he had not felt in decades. Fear. Real fear. Not for himself, but for everyone counting on him. "All ships," he said slowly. "Focus fire on that thing, everything we have." The human fleet turned as one and began the longest attack of the battle. And somewhere in the swarm, the mothership noticed them for the first time and began to respond. The Devourer mothership stretched across the void like a metal moon, its surface crawling with smaller units that constantly repaired and rebuilt its hull. Weapons that could crack planets emerged from ports along its length, charging with energy stolen from 1,000 dead stars. Admiral Daniel Hayes knew that his fleet could not survive a direct engagement with this thing. The mothership was too large, too powerful, too old. It had destroyed civilizations that made the current galactic powers look like children playing with toys. Conventional tactics would only delay the inevitable, but humanity had never been a species that accepted the inevitable. "All ships, execute scatter pattern, draw its fire and keep moving. I need time to coordinate something." The human fleet broke formation, individual ships racing in different directions, while maintaining constant fire on the mothership. The ancient machine responded with beams of energy that erased matter from existence. 3 cruisers vanished in the first volley. 2 more in the second. The constellation shuddered as a glancing hit tore through its outer hull. Nathan Cole pushed his small ship to its limits, weaving through debris and devourer units as he searched for any weakness in the mothership's defenses. Amy Walsh worked beside him, her hands moving across control panels faster than thought. "There," she said, pointing to a section of the mothership that seemed slightly less active than the rest. "That looks like some kind of processing center. If we could disrupt it, maybe we could slow the thing down." Nathan looked at the target and calculated the odds. Getting there would mean flying through the densest concentration of devourer units in the entire system. The chances of survival were almost zero. "Set course," he said. "Full speed." Amy did not hesitate. She had been waiting her whole life for a chance to make a difference. This was it. Across the battlefield, other human pilots were making similar choices. Captain Maria Santos left Little Zero with Thex and took her old merchant ship into the fight, using her knowledge of trade routes to navigate through spaces that military vessels could not reach. She delivered supplies to damaged human ships and evacuated wounded crew members. Never stopping. Never slowing down. High Chancellor Vortek watched the battle from his bunker, surrounded by generals who had spent their lives believing humans were the enemy. None of them spoke. There was nothing to say. The creatures they had feared and betrayed were dying to protect them, and there was no way to make that right. Admiral Hayes received reports from across his fleet. Losses were mounting. The mothership was slowly adapting to their tactics, just as it had adapted to everything else. They needed something new. Something the machine had never seen before. He thought about the ancient records, the ones that described how the Devourers had been stopped millions of years ago. A species had sacrificed everything to create a weapon that could destroy the mothership permanently. They had poured their entire civilization into a single device and used it knowing they would not survive. Humanity had found those records. Humanity had built that weapon, and Hayes had hoped he would never have to use it. Constellation to fleet. Prepare for emergency withdrawal on my signal. All ships, except the flagship, are to retreat to minimum safe distance. His bridge crew looked at him with understanding in their eyes. They knew what he was planning. None of them moved to stop him. "Admiral," his second-in-command said quietly, "let me stay with you." Hayes shook his head. "The fleet will need leaders when this is over. Get them home safely." "That is an order." The crew began evacuating, transferring to nearby vessels that would carry them away from what was about to happen. Hayes remained on the bridge with a skeleton staff of volunteers, men and women who had served with him for decades, and refused to let him die alone. Nathan Cole saw the constellation turning toward the mothership and understood immediately. He tried to signal the flagship to offer his own ship instead. But Amy stopped him. "Let them go," she said. "This is their choice. We honor it by surviving." The constellation accelerated toward the heart of the Devourer swarm. Smaller ships tried to intercept it, but the flagship's weapons cleared a path through them like a blade through water. The mothership noticed the approaching vessel and began concentrating its fire, tearing chunks from the human ship with every strike. Hayes watched his beautiful ship die around him and felt no regret. This was what they had been built for. This was why humanity existed. "Activate the weapon," he said, deep in the constellation's core. A device that had taken 3 centuries to construct came to life. It drew power from the ship's failing reactors, from the souls of every human who had ever fought the Devourers, from the hope of a galaxy that might survive to see tomorrow. The mothership recognized the threat too late. It tried to retreat, to fold space and escape, as it had done countless times before. But the weapon was already active, and there was nowhere to run. A wave of light expanded from the constellation, passing through the Devourer swarm like wind through grass. Every machine it touched simply stopped working. Billions of units went dark simultaneously. Their connections to the mothership severed permanently. The great vessel itself cracked and split, its ancient hull finally giving way to forces it could not adapt to. The constellation was gone. Admiral Hayes was gone. 300 volunteers who had stayed aboard were gone. But the Devourers were finished. The surviving human fleet gathered in the silence that followed. Ships that had been enemies hours ago drifted together, their crews staring at the debris field that had been the greatest threat the galaxy had ever known. Captain Amy Walsh broadcast a message to all human vessels, speaking words that she knew would be recorded and remembered. The watch is complete. The enemy is destroyed. Let us go home. But first, they had work to do. Human ships spread across the damaged systems, providing aid to survivors, repairing infrastructure, and helping rebuild what had been lost. They asked for nothing in return. They expected no thanks. High Chancellor Vortek met with President Catherine Hayes on the surface of his scarred world. He tried to apologize, tried to offer restoration of everything humanity had lost. Catherine listened politely, then shook her head. "We did not return for seats on your council," she said. "We did not return for territory, or trade rights, or apologies. We returned because a child asked for help, and we could not ignore her. Humanity will continue to watch over this galaxy, as we always have. But we will do it from the shadows, and you will not see us unless you need us." The human fleet withdrew to the edge of known space. The shield around Sol remained lowered, but humans did not return to council politics. They patrolled the dangerous regions, answered distress calls, and fought threats that others could not handle. And in the memorial halls of Earth, new names were added to the Black Stone. Daniel Hayes, the crew of the Constellation, all the others who had fallen so that the galaxy might live. Maria Santos returned to her trading routes, carrying little Zira back to a universe that was slowly healing. When the child asked about the humans who had saved everyone, Maria smiled and said simply that they were still out there, watching, always watching.